Hi, I'm Ken. Time for another look at my stamp collection. I think it's a good idea that we start these videos with some stamps. Last time we looked at my regular-sized British Wilding stamps. In the same lot that inspired that video, there were a bunch of the high-valued Wilding stamps featuring these castles. I sorted through that lot and organized what I found, learning a lot on the way. Sometimes it's hard to understand what the catalog is trying to tell you until you have multiple copies to see the differences. This is the page as I had it before I got my new lot. All I had was this one lonely example of one of the high-value Wilding Castle stamps, a 5-pound red. The 4 designs in this set have 3 major versions. Just like the smaller Wildings, these can be distinguished by their watermarks. There's an Edward's Crown watermark, a multiple crown watermark, and finally an unwatermarked version. I had seen notes about the different printers for the first 2 sets, but without any reference copies, there was no way for me to tell what variant my red was. So I labeled it number 537 because it has the Edward's Crown watermark. You can see that this lot gave me a major upgrade. I went from 1 stamp to 14 different stamps. And now I can see the variants that the catalog was trying to tell me about. The first column of stamps on this sheet has the Edward's Crown watermark stamps. But the Stanley Gibbons catalog says that there were 2 printers for that first version of the stamps, Waterloo and Delarue. The catalog describes a few ways to tell these printers apart. Most of those require differences in the selvage on the sheet, so you can't use that for identifying singles. There are some recognizable markings and variations on some stamps, but those differences aren't on every stamp. The catalog describes cleaner lines on the Delarue stamps, making them look lighter and softer than the Waterloo stamps. Also, there are slight color variations listed that you could only see with a bunch of different stamps together. Not listed in the catalog is an easier way to tell these issues apart. There is a very minor perforation difference between the 2 printings, less than you can tell with a perforation gauge. The Delarue perforations are slightly closer than the Waterloo. This shows up as a slightly wider top perf on the Waterloo stamps, which the catalog does mention. Since I had enough copies of this stamp, I was able to line up the perforations between pairs of stamps and find an example of each type. The one on the left is the Waterloo version. At the top right you can see a small bit of the blue cut line in the perf. The one on the right has slightly closer perforations and the top and bottom perfs are narrower compared to the Waterloo perfs. It's the one printed by Delarue. Now you can see for the 2, 6, and 5-pound stamps that I've tucked a second stamp behind the first. Those are the Delarue stamps. I got all 4 of the Waterloo stamps. That brings us to the center column. Those are the multiple crown versions. Again, there were 2 printers for these issues, Delarue and Bradbury Wilkinson. This is the same story as with the Edward's Crown issues. There are sheet variations between the 2 and minor printing differences, but again we are saved by a combination of shades and perforation differences. The Bradbury Wilkinson perfs are slightly closer than the Delarue stamps. For this watermark I was able to find all of the Delarue stamps and the 2 higher Bradbury Wilkinson stamps. Finally, there's only 1 type of the unwatermarked stamps. These should be the most common types, but I only found the first 2 of them in this lot. I certainly can't complain. Remember back to the page I made? When I made this page, I didn't expect to get many of these stamps. Notice that I had combined this page with all the other high-value British stamps. I'll need to split the Wilding Castles into their own page to fit them all. Also notice that my stamp strip is just 3 stamps wide. When I make a 4 stamp wide strip, it extends beyond the decorative border. This is actually perfect for holding 1 of each denomination in the set, and that's what I'd normally do for a series like this. I prefer to stack variants in a column, but for this page I had previously made the choice to use the 3 wide strips, favoring staying in the lines, and never guessing that I'd get so many of these stamps. And that brings us to the second topic of this video, how I build my album pages. In the last episode, I talked about how I was going to have to refresh all those Wilding album pages. When I sat down to do that project, it dawned on me that I might as well film that process and share it with all of you. Anyway, as long as those high-value castle stamps are on our mind, let's take a look at those ones first. I start with a directory for each album, and at least 1 file for the cover and another file for the album pages. That makes it easier since the different pages have different formatting styles. I use OpenOffice from Apache for my files. It's free, and just close enough to Word to be frustrating. But did I mention it's free? I need to make a number of changes to this page. First, I want to split it into 2 pages, one for the castles and one for the newer high-value designs. Then I need to update the title pages to reflect what's on each page. Finally, I need to update the catalog numbers and headers to reflect the various printings. Let's do that. This is my single page for British high-value stamps. The first thing I need to do is insert a new page. Now I copy this page title and paste it into the new page. Next, I go back to the original page and change the title to reflect just the Wilding high values. I add in the castles note here and update the date to reflect the new range on the page. My preference is to use the full dates in the titles. Now I update the title on the new page. There's a new date range and some indicator in the title that we've moved off the Wilding designs. I'm not so happy with using new designs. The first set of these are also castles. I could use that, but there is this Britannia stamp on the page. It's not a castle. I considered using Machen in the title, but these stamps aren't really Machen stamps. New designs will do for now. You may be wondering why I've put the Britannia stamp on this page. Moving it to its own page might future-proof the page. I've looked forward in my more recent catalog and can see that there aren't any more high values like this. The rest of the album is all Machen's, so I think it's good for now. Next, I'll copy the table from the first page and paste it into our new page. I drag that to the top of the page. There's a quirk with this program that every time I click out of the table, it resets to the top of the page. This is just a little trick that helps me when that happens. I also make the table box bigger to give me room for any adjustments. I'll change this header to say Castles, then delete the stamps that are now on their own page. I'm adding headers to clarify what these columns are. The second and third variants have silhouettes for the Queen's image, and there are 2 different printers for them. I've got to add the accent to this final E and fix the underlining. With the printer names, I want to give the columns a little more space. There. That looks good. Oh, I forgot, one more thing. That last stamp is 10 pounds, not 1 pound. Now I resize the table and drag it back to the bottom edge. One little adjustment. Done. Back to the Wildings page. Drag this table to the top and resize it. Delete the stamps that we moved to the new page. Add columns for the 2 other printer variants. I could have just added the comma A indicators to the existing columns, but I decided to add the columns to give me a good place to show the printer names and date ranges. When I'm done, there will be 5 columns here to match with the 5 strips of stamps on the page. Set the date ranges correctly, and add in the A version catalog numbers. Adjust the widths of these columns. There. Resize the box and drag it back to the bottom. Good, I'm happy with that. My current album has the smaller sized Wildings across 4 pages. I'm going to restructure them across 7 pages, one for each of the major types in the Stanley Gibbons catalog. Before I do that, I'm going to update my title to the newer format, making it something I can copy to all the new pages. I'm adding Wilding to the title. Then I'm setting the date range for my first section. Next, since I know what stamps will be on this page, I'll drop the page 1 and replace it with what's actually on this page, the Tudor crown stamps. Good. Now I need to clear out pages 2, 3, and 4. And now I'm adding 3 more pages to the file for a total of 7. Back to the top. I realized I want the entire range of Wildings on each header, so I'll add that in. That's better. I copy the new header and one by one add it to the top of each new page. For each page, I change the title and date to reflect the stamps on that page. I check my work as I go back to the top to work on the table. Again, I move the table to the top of the page. I'm deleting the decimal issues column. When I first made this page, I hadn't understood that these were all released as special booklets and souvenir sheets. I'll make some pages for those later, but for now they're out of here. Now let's fix my granite typo. I want to clean up these column titles. I'm starting by adding room for a third word in the third column. I'm going to start each with the watermark, and I've decided to use a slash to separate the features. Multiple crowns is right as it is. The next one is multiple slash graphite. I guess I don't need 3 words. Let's go back and fix the Edwards slash graphite column. Multiple slash graphite. Now just 2 lines here. I might as well delete this unneeded row and add the final date. This 6th column doesn't have a single watermark, still just 2 words. But this last column needs the multiple watermark, moving phosphor down, adding in multiple. That reminds me, I need to add a footnote to show the watermarks for column 6. There. Make some room for the footnote, add the footnote with the ranges of the 2 different watermarks, a little format adjustment, and I want this aligned to the right side. I could use a tab here, but I prefer the flexibility of spaces. A little to set it apart from the table. Good. Now I need to add the variant numbers that I want to track. I think I'll put that odd 4-pence commemorative here. It naturally fits in this column. The other variants I'm adding are either for minor color varieties or that 1 crown detail difference. Now that's done, I can resize the box and move it back down to the bottom of the page. Oh, and now I don't like how that footnote aligns with the right edge. Slide it over. That's better. Now I can copy the table and paste it into all the other Wildings pages. And now back to the top checking my work. With that done, I'll add a placeholder page for those decimal Wildings. I won't bother to fill these out until I get at least one of them. That's it. Time to print. I use a 67-pound cream-colored paper for most of my albums. And off to the printer. I know, I made a bunch of mistakes editing those Wilding pages. When I was done, I did a proofread and found that I'd even reintroduced the granite error. I bet it drove you all crazy when you saw me put that error back in. I hope you were yelling at the screen like you were watching a bad monster movie. Anyway, before I printed the pages, I went back and fixed everything. When everything is printed, I 3-hole punch each page. And I like to round off the corners on my pages. I think it makes them more resistant to dings. And the pages are done. I cut the mounts using a paper cutter. You can buy a small cutter specifically for cutting mounts, but I used this larger one for other projects that a small stamp cutter couldn't handle. Besides, this bigger cutter gives me room for my cutting guide. When I'm cutting, notice that I hold the mount down close to the blade. These mounts will curl up during the cutting, leaving a slightly off-angled edge if I don't do that. I set this cutting guide to make consistently sized mounts. I've written notes about where to place the guide for the different size mounts I use. And I've put a line at the top of the guide to position it for the cut. Under this flap, I have a piece of tape to hold it down, and I've added another line so I can position the guide with the flap either up or down. To cut the mount, I slide it into the fold of the guide, I hold the mount down near the blade and cut. That gives me a consistent mount each time. Once all the mounts are cut, there's nothing left to do except paste them up on the pages and put in the stamps. I won't spend time on this video walking through that whole process. I think it's pretty straightforward. I'll end this video showing you the finished pages. I'm really happy with how they came out.